Catania is, you've got your football and then the boot kicking the football. Football's Sicily. Catania is a big city right next to the toe of Italy, right underneath a giant volcano. So my mission covered Sicily, Malta, and the heel and the toe of the boot. It is a wonderful place. And I hope to someday take my wife there. Show her the sights, the incredible history hidden around every corner. Show her the glories of a sunrise over the Mediterranean or the Adriatic Sea. Let her feel the sea breeze and see the hills. It's so green in the springtime, covered with orchards as well. And I want her to see what I've seen. I wish everybody could. It's a beautiful country. Storms tend to come up quickly on the Mediterranean. The weather can change rapidly. It's clear and then suddenly it rains for 4 hours. When it rains, it really knows how to rain. A lot of places I've lived, Utah in particular, when it rains, you wait 20 minutes and there'll probably be clear skies. Sicily, if it starts raining, you have to take shelter or go home and get your wet weather gear. Mostly, Sicily is a sunny place. A lot of southern Italy is. When you get up north, you start getting clouds that run into the Alps and just dump their rain all over the place. Mostly warm weather, clear skies, and beautiful sunlight are my memories of Italy. You don't have to worry about sunscreen most of the time because the way the cities are built, they go from tall apartment buildings to like 3 villas and then countryside. All the cities are compact. Everybody lives close together. So you've got shade everywhere. You never spend too long in the sun at a stretch. So if you're lucky enough to go to the south, just enjoy the climate. Don't worry too much about rain. It doesn't happen too often. Italy is an amazingly beautiful place. Sicily is warmer than the rest of Italy. It's also a fair bit drier. There's a native kind of cactus that grows there, which has delicious prickly pear fruit. There are also groves of orange trees and lemon trees and grapefruit. Citrus seems to just love Italy. And of course, as in all of Italy, there are vineyards. That was perhaps one of the greatest challenges culturally. People couldn't give up the fruit of the ground, their wine, vino. It's tradition. You could buy fancy wines that had been aged for centuries, carefully stored in caves. Or you could buy more common, classy wines that came in beautiful, elegant bottles with labels that had been aged for just a decade or two. And then there was wine which came in basically a cardboard milk carton that would be drunk out of a Dixie cup, generally with almost every meal. It was very difficult for people to surrender a tradition in favor of a new one. I came from a tradition of faith, from a Mormon tradition. Learning to cope with a tradition that was a little bit different than mine was trying at times. But fortunately, I had the chance to live outside of Utah for most of my life. I learned to see other cultures to some extent. I still managed to get a fair bit of culture shock, but the bite was slightly dulled. People have lived in Italy longer than we've had history. Much of what Italy used to be has disappeared. There are very few old forests. Places that had tons of trees are now mostly empty. Sicily especially. We read that it was once covered in trees. It was logged and tamed and farmed. You can't set your foot anywhere on Sicily that someone hasn't set their foot before, except on the volcano, because that's new rock. But for the rest of it, it's difficult to find anywhere truly wild. There are some birds. There are some small rodents. Maybe one or two snakes and lizards, and they're fun little geckos. They're awesome little creatures who run right up a wall. For the most part, though, Italy isn't as wild as I was used to. I was used to places that have had many people for a lot less time. Places like Georgia, or Utah, or Pennsylvania. Places where there still is a lot of wild. In Italy, you're as likely to see an ancient Roman aqueduct as you're driving through the countryside as you are to see a stand of trees. Cool. Northern Italy is a lot more green than southern Italy. Southern Italy tends to be drier. Northern Italy, you get up towards the foot of the Alps. You have more forests there. You've got greenery that grows. Southern Italy, especially in Sicily, is close to Africa, so think northern Africa. That's what it looks like. A little bit of cactus. In the cities, you've got palm trees. You've got fig trees. You've got pomegranates. You've got, of course, hundreds of citrus. You've got some species of oak that grows wild, and a few types of mangrove, but for the most part, Italy shows the touch of man everywhere, which is amazing for history. And beautiful countryside. During the Middle Ages and throughout, Italy was a group of warring states. It was conquered by everybody. It was conquered by the Normans. They swept through and conquered all of it. It was conquered by the Persians. The Ottoman Empire had a strong foothold there. It was conquered by various families, and Italy at the time was these tiny little pieces that were being squabbled over by all the powers of Europe. The land is covered with castles. Every region has its own architectural style. In Sicily, a lot of the architectural style shows Arab heritage because of the time that the Persian Empire took it over. Although there are some Norman castles from the conquerors from France, there are amazing statues everywhere. I remember once walking down the streets of Catania, and I turned a corner in the middle of the city, and I had thought I'd been living there for a few months, and I had pored over historical books because I love the history, and figured out the best sights to see, and all these incredible cathedrals and castles and ruined Greek temples. And I thought I'd seen it all. I turned a corner on this unknown back alley of the city, and right in front of me was a little opening, a tiny little piazza. And there was a medieval tower stretching up 4 stories, just in the middle of the street. It was boarded up. Nobody had used that building in probably 40 years. Nobody knows about that building. And there it was, older than my nation. A tower. What it was used for is lost to history. I'm not sure anybody knows anymore. I asked some people, why is there a watchtower in the middle of the city? Nobody could answer me. Perhaps it was from a time when that tower was tall enough to see over all the other buildings and over the city walls so that they could see the invaders coming. Perhaps that tower was just a way some nobleman was showing off, and they erected it in their courtyard. Who knows? One of the first things that struck me about Italy is how much everything is made out of stone. There's stone everywhere. Part of it is everything is so old. The oldest things that last the longest are made of stone. So if there's already something standing there and it's not falling down yet, why build a new one? So the stone buildings outlived all the wood buildings. And the population of stone buildings just gradually grew over time. Italy is full of history. Leonardo da Vinci was Italian. Michelangelo, Donatello, your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle namesakes were all Italian. Great artists, poets, painters, sculptors. And in many ways, the birth of the Renaissance. The Renaissance was, in many ways, laying the groundwork for the restoration of the gospel. New ideas sprang out. It used to be that if you spoke up with a new idea, you'd get killed. Look at what happened to Galileo Galilei. He was nearly executed. He had to recant, and then he was kept on house arrest for the rest of his life for simply saying that the moon was not a perfect celestial sphere, but had craters and mountains. The Renaissance suddenly broke through centuries of darkness, oppression. There had been inquisitions, there had been heretical trials, but suddenly this culture of openness, of new ideas, of accepting, of searching for new worlds. Christopher Columbus, whose name was actually Cristoforo Colombo, who was Italian, went to Portugal and Spain and other places like that and found funding. And he sailed to the New World, found a place which became a beacon of freedom, where the gospel could be restored. Because even though the Renaissance had opened up so much, it needed more than that for the gospel to be restored. It needed new traditions. That is, I think, one of the most challenging things about Italy. They've never seen anything like the restored gospel. Churches, to them, are these great institutions with leaders bedecked in gold and velvet who basically sermonize and perform sacraments. And then they're done. They're saved. Their work is done. They simply attend and pay their due and occasionally confess. And they believe that they can carry on. A lot of people see that this isn't true. A lot of people see the flaws in that. And some of them lose faith in all faith. They lose sight of all which comes from God and say, it can't be true. I just can't deal with this. And then watching their face change as they suddenly hear the message of the restored gospel. That is the best thing about Italy. Is people suddenly realize that there is an alternative. There is a truth. There is something that they can find that will change their life and give everything direction and meaning. For a place which has seen so much glory in the past, it's also seen so much darkness. For a place that has been a light to the world, it feels kind of sidelined now. Italy needs the church. One thing I wish I could do is I wish I could return there for the opening of the Roman temple. The fact that we have a temple in Rome, to me, feels like a great miracle. It's proof that things I did and things that other missionaries have done have really opened up this place to the restored light. It's a beautiful country with beautiful, kind, wonderful, loving people who have a tendency to talk with their hands all the time. If you think I'm animated, you ought to see what they do. Hand gestures mean a lot. Well, do you need to... Okay. So hand gestures mean a lot in Italian. For instance, that's I don't care. Or that would be no. Doing this kind of gesture is sort of a pleading, placating gesture. This is frequently done to mean exactly. Or there would be this gesture, which means skillful. If you're wondering where that one comes from, a lot of these actually come from the mafia. This is, kind of watch yourself. He's good with a knife. Or that would be, he's so good with his knife he could shave with it without looking. Occasionally you have to be careful because there will be a dust storm in the Sahara Desert. And then the winds blow north. And you go out in the morning and the sky is yellow and you look at your nice white Sunday shirt hanging on the clothesline and it's yellow too. And Sahara dust does not come out. And it can blow clear across the Mediterranean. One of the more peculiar things to be aware of in Italy, there are very few large appliances. Most houses will have a refrigerator and a stove and a washing machine. Maybe an air conditioner if the person doesn't believe that an air conditioner will make them sick. That's something I'll address later. You don't have a dryer. So you hang all your clothes on a clothesline if it's sunny, or on a clothes rack indoors if it's raining. Most places don't have a dishwasher, but the dryer is what's interesting. There is a bit of the mafia. At one point, I met a woman who had shot a man. Everybody knew that she shot the man, except the police. Everybody on the entire street knew. Maybe even some of the police knew. Nobody would do anything about it because she was part of the family and therefore was untouchable. Italy used to be hundreds of different countries. Every city in some areas was a different country. They would have little tiny petty kings who had tiny little kingdoms. Now, there wasn't a whole lot of communication after Rome fell between all these cities. They all started from Latin, and Latin eventually began to corrupt. In Sicily, there was a language born called Siciliano. Siciliano was the trade language spoken by all Sicilians, and then they would each have their own dialect. In Catania, it's Catanese. In the center of Italy, near Caltanissetta, it would be something entirely different. The tiny towns still speak primarily in their dialect. They'll switch to Italian for you if you don't understand it, which can be very, very different. even though it's a dialect, it's very much a different language in each city. I speak some Siciliano because I served in Sicily most of my mission. I was in Puglia, the heel of the boot, for a little while. Pugliese was impossible for me to understand. It just sounded like some African language. But Siciliano. In Italian, him is lui, her, lei. You guys would be voi. Us is noi. And then them, loro. But in Siciliano, him, igiu, her, igia. You guys, vautri. Us, nautri. Them, cosautri. So, words change almost beyond recognition in some cases. But, fortunately, they have a national language now. When Garibaldi conquered Italy, he took basic Italian, Florentino pretty much, from Florence, and he changed a few things and said, you all now speak this. And they said, yes sir. After all, he's the man who had united Italy. He actually had to basically give his life for his cause. He managed to create a nation which lasted far longer than anyone would have supposed. All of Europe was looking at Italy to try and decide how to divide it up. And suddenly out came this nation with its own language even. And there's still some sense of distance. Everybody still has their dialect. But in essence, they're all Italians. So, don't worry too much about dialects. You don't need to learn them. But it is fun if you've got the time. Italy is basically the birthplace of almost all Western culture. Italy is where Rome was. Rome had the drive, the power, and the will to conquer that Greece did not have. They copied the Greek culture and then expanded on it, creating an empire that covered the known world at the time. It was the strongest, the mightiest. All science, all art came out of Rome. The Roman Empire fell, and largely due to that, the Dark Ages happened, followed by the medieval period. During the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church came back, growing up in the ashes of Rome. Much of early Christianity was spread mostly through the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire provided a means of communication for ideas to travel. It taught language, it taught reading and writing. People could communicate with each other in far-off distant lands, something that had never been possible before. Because of that, the gospel spread through Paul, Peter, and the other apostles. With their death, that light was lost. There was only a tiny piece of light that remained. In Spain, to this day, there is a pillar erected by a local Roman leader who said on this day Christianity was completely destroyed. They believed that they had stamped it out entirely. The authority was gone. The doctrine was confused as terrified new converts passed on what little they could. In the embers of the Roman Empire, during the Middle Ages, through the Dark Ages and during the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church sprang up, creating a tradition of faith in Christ. But the tradition lacked something. There was something special about being able to return to this land of old faith, to stand where ancient apostles had stood and taught and teach the restored gospel. In Italian, the word pasta means meal. It also means what you usually eat at a meal, the pasta. So you've got your rigatoni, you've got your spaghetti, you've got your linguine, you've got your macaroni, you've got all these different kinds of pastas. Then you've got some that Americans haven't heard of, like gnocchi. Gnocchi are these little tiny potato dumplings. They're delicious. They're also technically a pasta. And almost every meal is pasta. I mean, there are other things too. Italian pizza is a little bit different than the stuff we have in America. Quite frankly, it's better. The crust is thinner, but it's not necessarily crispy and crunchy like you think it would be. It's thinner, but still has that wonderful pizza texture to it. The cheese is amazing. Real mozzarella cheese doesn't come in a brick wrapped in plastic. Real mozzarella cheese comes as a soft white ball floating in liquid. They keep it in this liquid to keep it moist. And it usually was made just a couple days ago, at most. If you're lucky, you hit the market and found some that was made that morning. Or if you're really cheap, you can buy the cheap stuff that comes in a sealed bag. You cut the top off, pour the liquid out, and then out pops this ball of white, delicious goodness. It just tears apart in your hand. You can just pull it apart in little strips. But when you put that on a pizza, it melted just right, and add some artichoke and some prosciutto, comes out just right. Don't ask for pepperoni pizza, because the word pepperoni means bell pepper. It's plural. It's pepperone is one, pepperoni is multiple. And they'll stare at you and say, bell pepper on your pizza, are you sure? I'm not sure I have any of that. I'm going to have to go out and get some. No, the pepperoni, what we call pepperoni, is salami. One of the best things to ask for is salsiccia, or sausage, on your pizza. That's a personal favorite. Although be aware that Italians do eat horse. So the sausage may be cavallo. Horse is actually quite tasty. These aren't someone's riding horse, they were bred as meat horses. So don't feel too bad about eating them. Horses aren't that much more intelligent than cattle after all. If you can stomach a hamburger, you should be able to eat horse. Italy was first opened as a mission by Lorenzo Snow. He gave a dedicatory prayer that was eloquent, beautiful, and we would frequently read the prophecies in it will all be fulfilled. Many of them have been. Some of them have yet to be fulfilled. But it is a wonderful place. When the members feed you, you will find out that your stomach can contain a lot more food than you believed was possible. Now, missionaries who go to Tonga and Samoa have developed a technique which has bled over to Italy, for which we are eternally grateful. It goes like this. You just rock back and forth to settle the food down in your stomach and compact it in there. And if you do that, you can fit more food in. And then you go home and go into food shock and just drop dead on your bed for hours. Because dinner comes in courses. Usually they'll start with something light, a few cheeses. You'll get to the house and they haven't started cooking yet because everything has to be fresh. So you talk for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And then the lady of the house will go into the kitchen and start cooking. And the wonderful smells start to come out. Then you're invited to the table, you get given some light snacks. Then you start into the heavier stuff. Bread comes out. And maybe there's a soup. And then comes a massive plate of pasta, just when you're starting to feel a little bit full. And then comes the meat. And you're, by this point, trying not to die. And then comes dessert. And about this point, you let your belt out another 4 notches. And then comes fruit. Every meal always ends with fruit. If you don't eat fruit, you won't be able to digest it properly. So you have to eat your fruit, elder. So the Polynesian sway comes in handy. You basically do it while your host's back is turned so they don't stare at you and ask you what the heck you're doing. And after the first few times, your stomach seems to stretch and get a little bit bigger. I can just imagine if someone cut me open, there'd be stretch marks across my stomach like a pregnant woman, where it had to stretch and then it grew bigger to accommodate this torture I was putting it through on a regular basis. But it's worth it. Nobody cooks food like Italians. If you go anywhere in the world, you'll find an Italian restaurant. Pizza is everywhere. Because, quite frankly, it's heavenly. The people of Italy are extremely precious children of our Heavenly Father. I envy you your chance to work with them. I've made friends who I will remember through the rest of my life, even if I haven't always been able to keep contact with them. I've had experiences teaching the gospel, watching people's lives change, eyes light up, hope come to people, even some who didn't join the church, but whose life I was able to touch and change forever, just with simply sharing the truth that I knew. You see, the greatest tool any missionary has is testimony. God doesn't necessarily need us to be eloquent. He doesn't need great teachers. That's why He sends us when we're so young, when we're so unprepared. He sends us out there to bear testimony. There's one thing that I remember that my mom said. She said, "Don't worry too much about being a perfect teacher. If the Lord wanted someone to teach perfectly, He would let the stone speak. And you know what? A stone would be a better missionary than you because a stone has no pride. But I've got one thing that they don't have. I could never convince anyone of the truth of the gospel. I couldn't prove it. I can't show anybody how it works. All I could say is, I know that this is the true church of our Heavenly Father. That it was restored because He loves us and wants us to return to Him. He wants us to have light, hope. He wants us to have something to work towards. He wants us to become more like Him. He wants us all to know about His Son's redeeming sacrifice so that we can return to our Father. I would look them in the eyes and I would tell them that. And that was more powerful than any proof I could find. It was more powerful than any book I could read. And what's even better is then I could say, and I know that just like it's promised at the end of the Book of Mormon, if you pray about these things and ask God if these are true, sincerely, God will talk to you and He'll tell you. There's nothing more I can say than I know, and I know you can know too. And so that's what I would say. Io so che Gesù Cristo è mio Salvatore. I know that Christ is my Savior. So che Joseph Smith era un profeta, chiamato da Dio. I know that Joseph Smith was a prophet called of God. So che queste cose sono vere. I know that these things are true. E nel nome di Gesù Cristo. Amen.
I just remember being excited, and because we had to stay in the MTC for 9 weeks, And so by the time we got ready to leave, none of us felt adequate with the language, but we were all just so excited to move on. Because that's what you think about. You don't really know what to expect in the MTC, but you do think about being in your mission country. And Italy was such an exciting mission for me and for everybody that supported me. And so I was just happy to get there. But I remember being, more than anything, just being discouraged with how far back I was with the language. And so I let that really drive me and help me to just motivate me, and everything that I did was just to learn and to it was a lot different listening to native Italians than it was listening to my teachers and speaking with the other missionaries. And so initially I just felt lost, and I do remember thinking that when I went out there, they do a really good job of inspiring you and motivating you in the MTC about what you're capable of as a missionary. And I remember when I got there, one thought that I had was, if I could speak Italian like all these other elders, I said I'd be baptizing everybody. And I remember I believed that. I really thought that I could, because I felt like the only thing holding me back is I can't talk. I can't talk to these people. And the other missionaries could, and they did well. But I thought, man, if I could speak Italian like these guys, I'd be all over the place. And so I just remember feeling motivated at first, discouraged, but it was a healthy, I don't know, it was a healthy setback, because I knew I would get there and I wanted to get there more than anything. And so I think that was the biggest thing, is just the language was just a huge barrier for me at first. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at the time, wasn't well established in that part of Italy. So my mission covered Sicily and the bottom part of the boot, the Calabrian part of the Puglia. So it's just the bottom part in Sicily, so the southernmost part. And it's very Catholic, very traditional. And Italians, when they say that they're Catholic, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're religious or anything. They more identify with Catholic as part of their culture. So when they say they're Catholic, it's as if they're saying I'm Italian. And not necessarily that I belong to their church, but that I'm Italian, therefore I'm Catholic. And that's why I can't hear your message, even though we think you're nice boys. And so yeah, lots of, it may be 1 out of 10 you would find a non-Catholic. And there's some other Christian religions, but predominantly Christian and almost 100% Catholic. And the church was small out there. I think there was only one area in the northernmost part of my mission that actually had a stake. The rest of them were just branches and districts. And so branches were real spread out. A lot of times members had to travel from distant areas. And so it was, it was a struggle to bring people in, and but a lot of times people pity Italian missionaries and European missionaries, because the conversion rate and the statistics aren't as high as other missions. But I had a phenomenal mission and I loved it, and I consider myself a very successful missionary, and it can be tough, but I just talked to everybody, and I got good at it and I got to enjoy it. And so I had a great amount of success and enjoyed it. It's interesting how southern Italy and northern Italy seem to have comparisons and some similarities between the southern U.S. and the northern U.S., and that the southern regions in both instances are both heavily reliant on, historically, like agricultural stuff and farming, and in the north they're more industrial and more academic. And so anyway, I was in the traditional country area, and I think they were a little bit more open to gospel discussion and more humble than other areas, because the Italians in my area, the southern Italians, would describe the northern Italians as being cold, rigid, closed off type of people. And they'd say, but down here in the south, we're warm and we're friendly, we're nice to everybody, and we'll talk to you. And I'm sorry that I can't come to your church, but or read your book. But they would always describe themselves as being more caloroso, is what they'd say, and just kind and friendly. And so I don't know, I don't have experience with what it was like in the northern missions, but ours was quite, I'd say, casual, traditional, and slower pace of life. And so I love Italian people, and I love their culture. They're good hosts. That when you come into their home, you're the priority, and they'll offer you a drink, they'll offer you something to eat, make sure that you're comfortable, and they're very good hosts. And so when you have an opportunity to be in their home, they make you feel special. And so I loved that. And I felt like they were just tremendously gracious hosts. And I remember thinking that's something that I want to take away and have in my own life, my own personal cultures. I want to be able to host like Italians do. And so I love that about them. And they're passionate. Yeah, when they believe something, when they feel that something is right, then they go for it. And so I love Italians for that, and appreciated that aspect of their culture. And the family in Italy is very important. And so I appreciated the fact about them. Mothers in Italy, to me, just are more reverenced and more sacred than we love our moms here in America, but I think more so in Italy, mom has a more special role. And so they love their mothers, and they are very reverent and respectful toward their mothers. Mothers are just, yeah, incredibly important in Italy, but families are important, and yeah, more so I would say than in other areas. A lot of times the girls, the daughters, they'll stay in the home until they get married. And so it's not uncommon to see an Italian family with 25, 28, 30-year-old daughters still in the house. And that's because the mothers don't want them to move out. They want them to be there with them. And so, yeah, you see really strong family units in Italy. And oftentimes those served as great stepping stones for presenting church principles and talking about eternal families and things like that. And so that was always our greatest avenue of introduction to the church, and the thing that really resonated and spoke to Italians as we were speaking to them as missionaries was talking about the family and family principles, because at times, they could dismiss certain points that they didn't agree with, but I could always tell that when we talk about the family and the love that you have in your family can continue and expand and be strengthened, I always knew that spoke to them, and they couldn't deny that. And so I was thankful for their traditional family ties and bonds that they had kind of established and that they still have. And so I love them for that. They say that the family is under attack, but the Italians are leading the way in the world, if you ask me, as far as keeping the family unit strong. And so they're good for that. Sicily was a lot of fun, maybe the most exotic region of our mission, just because it was the most far south. And so weather was great. It didn't get too cold in the winter time. I remember I was there in November or December with an Italian missionary from the northern area of Italy. And he just couldn't believe how warm it was in November and December. And he would say, "Oh, I cannot believe how warm this is. I've never seen weather like this in my whole life." And so he really liked that. So they have great weather, and lots of decent public transportation. I never drove a car a mile in my whole mission. Did a lot of walking, and every other kind of public transportation you could think of: taxi, bus, train, subway, boats in between the mainland and Sicily. And so, yeah, I did 6 months in Catania, Italy, which is just on the eastern sea coast of Sicily. And so it's fun being down there and traveling to the other regions to see other missionaries and conferences and things like that, because all the major cities are along the ocean due to porting and stuff and shipping. That's where all the major cities were established. And so beautiful views, beautiful beaches. And we did get to go to the beaches in the winter time when no one was there. And so although we didn't swim, it was still fun to be there, and that was a lot of fun for the missionaries. But Sicily's terrific, probably the most traditional, and areas where the Apostle Paul had come through, and so lots of history there, lots of European history. And so they have a very traditional, rigid work schedule in Sicily. And rigid in the sense that they won't change it, not necessarily rigid in hard, effective work produced. But their work day, I think it starts at about 8, and it goes until about 1 in the afternoon. And then they take a sacred and consistent break from about 1 to 4, when the business is shut down. And just like the business is shut down at the mall at 9, they bring down those big metal gates. They do that for all the businesses, the optometrists and the shops and the lunch places, and they shut down from about 1 to 4. And they'll go home and they'll get undressed and they'll get in their pajamas and they'll go to bed, literally go to bed. And then they'll get up and get work again from about 4:30 or 5 until about 9 or 10. And they have dinner late. They'll have a late dinner at about 10, 10:30. And so at night when we're getting ready to go to bed, you can hear pots and pans and smell steaks and pork chops and pasta in in our neighbors' apartments. And so that was interesting. But yeah, it's just as inconsiderate to go knock on somebody's door at 2:30 in the afternoon as it would be to knock on their door at 2:30 a.m. Because I remember one time we did it. I was with a companion and I said, let's go do some finding right now on our lunch. I forget what we were doing. And he said, I don't recommend that. And I said, yeah, let's just try it. Let's just see what's going on. You know, I've always heard that, but let's just try it. And so he says, okay. And so we went to this gentleman's door. We knocked on his door and he says, who is it? And we announce ourselves and he comes to the door and he just shouted at us about how inconsiderate it was to knock on his door at this time. And he was in his pajamas and he says, it's 2:30 in the afternoon. And he just screamed at us. And he says, do you know what time it is? Do you know how rude this is? And he says, leave, I'm trying to sleep. And so he says, I told you. And I said, yeah, you're right. And so I didn't try that again, but it was hard for me to believe that people could, I don't know, feel that way about sleeping during that time of day. But every now and then we'd catch a little nap with them, even though we were supposed to study and prepare during that time. But yeah, they like their afternoon nap and they believe that it's necessary. And so yeah, that's definitely a part of Italian culture. But as far as businesses go, I don't remember any like major industries or big businesses down there in Sicily, but a lot of, you know, family businesses, family restaurants, family shops, things like that. There's an Italian church, a major church, Catholic church, in every region or every city. And in one area, we got close with the don of that church. His name was Don Antonio, and we had been cleaning his church for a while. That's how we became friends with him. And over time, he came to really enjoy the missionaries. And so it was fun walking around with him around the city because he knew everybody. And it felt like being with a celebrity. It felt like being with like a high-powered politician, because he would kind of talk down to everybody in the city that he would see. And it was like he was everybody's grandpa or everybody's uncle. And so we'd walk down the street and he'd go into a bar. In Italy, a bar is just like a coffee shop. So we'd go in there and he'd order a coffee and he'd buy us a croissant or a juice. And some 2 or 3 guys would come in and he would talk down to them in a silly type of way, as if he were their uncle or their dad, and say, why haven't you called me? Why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? And they'd say, oh, I'm sorry, Don Antonio. And they kind of avoid him and say, no, you're not. You're not sorry. You've been saying that since you were a little kid. You're just like your father. And he'd say, I wish you were more like these American guys. These are good guys right here. And I always felt so proud to be with him, just that he liked us. And so yeah, we got to go up into his church, which is more like a castle, and he lived in the top floor, and just felt honored to be up there and to be in his presence and in his good graces more than anything, just to be accepted by him. And that was neat, because I remember up there eating lunch with him with his pride. He had jewelry and paintings, and it was interesting being up there, because I remember thinking that this is something that a tourist could never experience. Probably for any amount of money, you couldn't come up here and eat lunch with Don Antonio and have his maid prepare this wonderful Italian lunch for you. Her name was Angela. She's a really nice lady. And so I remember just feeling blessed and happy to be up there and experience that unique piece of Italian culture. And so I enjoyed that. But every region has just like a major church, and then there's a priest who's presides over that area. And it's fun just seeing how everybody's connected, because they all are born, and a lot of them just stay in the same area. Yeah, one interesting thing that I did notice about Sicily is just how a lot of times the people are very narrow-minded and simple, and that they don't really think beyond their what they know. And so in that sense, I did meet people from small towns in Sicily that had never literally been outside their city, which was, you know, about a city as small as any university town, as Norman, Oklahoma, or Provo, Utah, or any major, not bigger than that, not a huge industrial hub, but just a regular city, and they've never been outside that area ever. And I remember meeting them and just being fascinated that they had never been to Rome, they had never been to France, they had never even been outside of Sicily nor out of their city. And so I remember asking them, so you've never been to Rome, you've never been to Milan, and they'd look at me and they say, why do I want to go up there? I have everything I need here. I got my food, I got my grocery store, I got my brother that lives over here, and I got the guy down the street that fixes my shoes. And they'd say, so why do I need to leave? What am I gonna get? And I just remember being fascinated that these people have lived and died their whole lives in these small areas, and their family owns this apartment and or something like that. And so I don't think that's something that you see in other regions. It's just that tendency to just be so simple that you're not interested in anything the world has to offer. Just live and die in your own little city, and so, but they take great pride in where they're from, and they definitely represent their culture and their region. And so that was interesting. I think Sicilian food is the best, and they would always say that in the South, the food is the best. The South, the food is the best because we take the time to cook it, and we cook it with love, and we have the best ingredients, and we care about these type of things. And they would kind of bash the northern region and say, up there, they're all hustle and bustle and make money, and so their food isn't as good. And so I'd say, oh, okay, that's interesting. And but I would always kind of take it with a grain of salt because I had never been up there. And I know how biased the southern and prideful and proud, in a good way, that southern Italians can be. But as I would meet college students that had studied in northern Italy or that would work up there and come home, and they would say the same things. They would reaffirm that the food down here is the best. And so I heard it from everybody. And so I feel like southern Italian food is the best food that you can get. And everybody says, oh, Italian food's delicious. And so you have these high expectations before you go out. And so I remember being kind of prepared to be possibly disappointed just because everybody had built it up so much. But the food exceeded anything that I had ever had in my mind. Just that good, that delicious. And I think it's the ingredients, because to me there's nothing tremendously different about the way that they prepare it. I think it's just the ingredients. And they had said that, I guess that region, that land, the tomatoes, the olive oil, the garlic, it just tastes a little bit better, just has a little bit better punch. And yeah, they say that you can follow the same recipe, the same sequences outside of Italy, and it won't taste the same because it doesn't have the that Italian soil, I guess, just produces some really, really special food. But one cool food that they had in Sicily was called arancino, and it's like a little fried ball, and it has rice inside of it, and then within it they have cheese and meat, and you can put all kinds of different things on it. And those were delicious. They were incredible. And they filled you up. One little ball could fill you up, and you just buy them from these little street vendors or little shops. It wasn't something you order at a restaurant. It's more like a snack that you get. But I love those, and you can't get those outside of Sicily. And so those are definitely worth trying if you get a chance to eat those. And I also really like the spaghetti frutti di mare. It's just a spaghetti with all kinds of different seafood mixed in there. And their seafood's delicious, and it's all fresh right there from the port. And so that was really good. And their pizza's delicious. I still love American pizza. It's just different, kind of a different flavor, different taste, really thin crust, and unique toppings that you see on there. But the pizza's incredible. And it comes out differently because they cook it in a different type of oven. They cook it in a stone oven. And it just comes out tasting different. But the food there is unbelievable. Their breakfast is different. I'm a big breakfast eater. I love eggs and sausage and pancakes, but that's forbidden in Italy. Yeah, in Italy for breakfast you need to have something light, like cappuccino, maybe a pastry, and a cigarette is what they like to drink, what they like to take for breakfast. But yeah, they don't like big breakfasts, so something light for breakfast, a glass of water and a pastry or something like that. Lunch is their big meal. And so yeah, big lunch, you come home or go to a restaurant, but come home and a big extravagant meal with appetizer, and then they eat their pasta first, a big dish of pasta, and then afterwards it's a meat, whether fish or steak or pork chop or chicken or something like that, with some potatoes that follow, and then dessert and salad. And but it's all one after the other. They don't intertwine them or mix them, and they don't eat their bread with their pasta. Yeah, they say that'll make you fat, but you can eat your bread after you're done with your pasta. Just don't eat your bread with your pasta at the same time, otherwise it'll make you fat. And so and they always say that. They say, don't do that, you'll get fat. And so it's interesting the way that their traditions and tendencies that they have, and how they believe them. And yeah, the gelato was fantastic. It's just their ice cream, and I don't know how they make it, but it's incredible. They have really good flavors, and so I would recommend that. And if you have a chance to go to Italy on a mission or otherwise, just to definitely try their gelato. I think that's their most famous dessert. They serve it year-round, but it's incredible in the summer because it's so hot, and they don't have great air conditioning. So it's nice to get that in the summertime. Drinks, I don't remember any special Italian drinks, but one drink that I do know that they like is what's the word? It's like club soda, just like carbonated water, and that's almost as popular as anything else out there. And there are some missionaries that really got into drinking that, and they call it acqua frizzante. But I never converted. I never got into that. It's just hard. I didn't like the way that it tasted. But that's a lot more popular than it is here. And so a lot of carbonated water, club soda, they like that. And so look for that if you go to Italy. Their Italian is different as well in Sicily. They still speak Italian, but there are a lot of areas where they speak interesting dialects of Italian. And so that was interesting too. I remember one time I was with an Italian elder, and we were lost in the woods looking for something, and he started speaking to this Italian missionary, and I was always thankful to be with him because he was Italian. But I do remember one instance when he was asking for directions, and this gentleman says, it's yada yada yada, it's over here, it's this and that. And he just says, I don't understand what you're saying. And I thought that was so hilarious because he was Italian, and I had said that so many times in just learning Italian that it was nice to kind of see him say that and say, yeah, now you know how I feel. And but yeah, lots of dialect down there. Okay, so in Italian, the way that you learn it in a textbook in university or in Rome or Milan, to say something like, I'd like to come to your house and talk to you, you'd say, mi piaceva passare dalla tua casa per parlare con voi. Mi piaceva passare da tua casa per parlare con voi. But in dialect, in Sicilian dialect, I think you'd say, mi piacesse passare a tua casa per parlare contigo. And so it's quite a bit different. In order to say no one in Italian, you say nessuno. But to say no one in dialect, you say nudu, which to me sounds comical, and I think to other Italians it sounds silly. And so just to say go lay down in Italian, you'd say, it's like a funny saying that they say just to say like get out of here, or you're crazy, or stop with that. They say go lay down, and so you'd say vai a coricarti. But to say it in dialect, which sounds it has a better sting, you say vai cucati. And so just a lot of syllables that get dropped, and they've just been conquered by nations in the past and kind of imposed their languages and phrases on the Sicilians, and that's how it's evolved. But we would always kind of joke with the Italians and say, because when they get upset, they start to yell and wave their hands, upset over anything. It could be soccer or traffic, or they didn't get wine with their steak. Then they would speak in dialect. And so I'd always kind of sarcastically joke with the Italians and they'd say, oh, you speak Italian, you speak well, you must study. We say, yeah, we do. We love to study your language and learn about your culture. But when we get mad, speaking dialect. And they'd always kind of laugh because it was ridiculous that we would be able to speak dialect. And so interesting learning that. Yeah, we were encouraged not to study it, not to learn a whole lot, just because it's just, it doesn't sound very professional or dignified, but it's still a lot of fun to learn the little dialect phrases. And but it's like trying to learn a new language. Good luck trying to go back and forth in dialect. So Italians are very opinionated when it comes to air conditioning. And we have central air a lot of times anywhere you go here. But over there they don't. They just have the mounted air conditioning units. And a lot of homes, they don't have them at all. And so I think it's just all what you're used to, all kind of what you've grown up with. I've seen that. But if you haven't grown up with it, then you're not used to it. And also, if you have a strong belief against certain aspects of air conditioning, then there are very real effects attached to that. Yeah, and so Americans would always struggle when we go over there in the summer because it would get hot, and it's very humid in Italy. And so we'd be fighting to stay composed in a hot chapel or in a hot living room, and it wouldn't bother the Italians too much. And I remember amongst ourselves or in certain circles, we would always long for air conditioning and want to have air conditioning. And so you mention that around Italians, and they'd say, air conditioning's not too good for you. And we'd say, what do you mean? And they'd say, well, if it touches you in the back of your neck, in the back of your head, and especially if it gets on your back, you'll get sick. And I thought they were being silly the first time that I heard it because it just sounded absurd. And so I said, well, what do you mean you get sick? I mean, to me, you just feel refreshed and you feel happier, you feel nicer. And they said, no, absolutely not. If it touches this area of your body, you'll get sick. And especially if it touches you at night when you're trying to sleep, you'll be a mess, you'll get sick. And so I just always thought that was, I don't know, I just thought it was silly. To me, I couldn't relate to that. Because the opposite would happen to me. When air conditioner would touch me anywhere, I just feel better in every way. And so in this apartment, we didn't have air conditioning. And then our mission presidency installed an air conditioner, put some money and bought us an air conditioner. And so they said, where do you want it? And we said we want it in the bedroom so we can sleep well. And so we were all excited the first night that we had our air conditioner. I think we had like 3 or 4 American guys, and we happened to have an Italian guy with us, an Italian elder, and we were all sleeping in the same house, a few different companionships. And so it was like Christmas to us. We said that tonight we're going to sleep with the air conditioning, and we're going to have the best sleep of the summer. And so the Italian objected. I forget what his name was, elder something, and but he just objected, and he says, no, gentlemen, we can't do that because we'll get sick. And so we all laughed and we said, well, what we're going to do is just show you how you won't get sick and how you're actually going to love it. And so he was uncomfortable and he was nervous. And so these guys, we probably turned the air conditioner up too high, but we got the room quite cold and we bundled up in our blankets and it felt like home. It just felt so nice to sleep in a cool room. And I remember waking up the next morning just feeling refreshed and feeling happy and feeling ready to go. And the Italian elder did in fact get sick. He had a runny nose and he had a cold and a sore throat, and he literally was sick. And I just remember looking at him thinking it came true, it really happened. And so yeah, I guess when you do have I don't know, an expectation and a belief, and if you're not used to something, that whatever you believe can come true. And so Italians, they don't love air conditioning the way that we love it. And so that's just something that you have to get used to when you're in Italy. But I'll never forget that. I'll never forget how that guy got sick. And then the rest of us were just happy and felt great. Opposite happened. And so, interesting thing about Italian culture. But it was basically cow intestines, kind of in a stew. And it smelled delicious when I smelled it. And I was excited to have lunch. But then when they poured it on the plate, it was just the side of it. And then when they explained to me what it was, it was tough to eat. But I forget what the name of it was. Smelled delicious. It probably tasted great. I just, it was the one thing that I declined. It was just hard for me, and just mentally I couldn't do it. But so I guess just the cow intestines, the cow stomach in the stew. But that was uncommon. I only saw that once in one unique area. The rest of the food was fabulous. I don't think I had anything too crazy or dangerous. I remember one time, I think I had a companion that had left his wallet on the train after we had exited the train. And so we ran back from down the street and boarded the train and went to his seat and found it. And right when he says, "I got my wallet," and we felt relieved, the train started to roll. And we hadn't paid to be on that train, nor did we know where it was headed. And so we ran to the quickest exit, and we jumped off the train. It wasn't going full speed, but it was moving. And, you know, you don't lead very exciting lives on the mission. And so I remember that it kind of got our hearts beating. And so that was probably the most exciting story we had. I always felt the spirit when I would talk about the family with Italian missionaries and with Italian families, and I could see, and I would apply eternal principles to their family and opportunities that it could present to them. And when I could see it working on them and see them ask questions, I always felt the spirit very strong, and it strengthened my belief in eternal families and temple work. And but anytime that I would talk about the family with families present, and just apply eternal principles directly to their circle and to their group, and they would consider each other and consider the possibilities and ask questions and grow, and their interest would grow. I always felt the spirit very strong there and felt it testify to them, and so that was very special to me. That you need to be patient, that a lot of times I think you hope for and expect to see things kind of quick or based on the amount of effort that you put in. But my mission definitely taught me patience and taught me to accept that you don't always understand things the way that they are, and just to be okay with that. So I just say patience, and more than anything, like, the mission for me really developed my conversational and people skills more than anything. I just feel like it brought them through the roof, because I was always trying to, in a respectful way, kind of trying to outwit people into just letting us sit down with them. Because once we got a chance to sit down with them and speak to them, we could always relate our message and always key in on something that interested them. It was just we just had to get them to give us a few minutes, and so I got quite good at that, at just finding something that they would listen to. And so yeah, I really learned how to negotiate, if you will, and talk to people and just relate to people. And so I'd say it really helped my my social skills, and so I'm thankful for that. We had pretty good weather in Italy. It didn't get terribly cold, just a lot of rain in the winter, and it would get quite hot in the summer. But I don't know, some really bad rain, and but I think generally the weather is pretty decent in Italy. Just, you know, you're always out in it, but nothing too extreme. It never froze, and, you know, got hot, but I think there are hotter regions, so I don't know. Weather's pretty good, I think. In hindsight, I really only remember the good things, but and it was all good in hindsight. It really was. But I think one of the hardest things for me was just to make a connection with people as you're teaching people, and you develop a friendship and you really develop a connection, and to see them have a testimony grow within them, and but for whatever reason, whether it be family pressure or fear or just whatever it was, to decide not to progress, to decide not to move forward. And but they were still, you know, those were still wonderful, because I feel like in time that those type of people that weren't ready when I was there, that they will be ready eventually. And I know that they experienced and that they felt the spirit, that they saw something different, and that they felt something in their heart, and that never leaves. And so I'm confident in that, and that they'll be okay eventually, and that we just played our role and helped support them in their path towards returning to their Heavenly Father. But maybe that's just selfishness and limited perspective on my part, and that it was hard because I wanted to see it when I was there on their behalf. And so I struggled with that a little bit. If you're getting ready to go on a mission to Italy, I'd say anything that you can do with learning the grammar, with studying the language, will give you a tremendous leg up. And then just sharing the gospel with anybody, doing missionary work will help you. And because it wasn't so much Italian or Italians, I feel that made it tough. But I feel like you kind of have to find yourself and learn how you're going to respond in certain situations to missionary questions. And nobody can teach you that. You kind of have to learn that on your own. So just sharing the gospel and going out with the missionaries and going through the process of what an investigator goes through when they're learning from a missionary, I think that would be the best preparation you can make. Just be social. Just go out and meet people and expand. And yeah, it can be a little bit tough adjusting right when you get back off the mission, but just take the same principles that you applied on your mission and don't lay them to rest, but just apply them in your future life as you go. And I think that's probably the best advice that I could give. If I could give any advice to somebody that was getting ready to serve in Italy, it would be that there's more to your mission than just helping out investigators and helping out members. It wasn't something that I realized or had really prepared for before my mission was to help out the missionaries and to look out for each other. But I think that there are three groups that you really take care of on your mission. That's the investigators that you teach, the people that you find, the members, and thirdly is really the missionaries. And so think about yourself and think about the other young missionaries that you're going to be serving with, because in hindsight, I know that the Lord, I feel like those are the three groups that He prioritizes and that He takes care of when missions are served. And I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to make the missionaries a priority and to consider their needs and to look out for them. I was just focused, tunnel vision on teaching people, helping the members, finding less active members, and finding converts. That's all that I had considered. And I don't think it's something that's really taught or shared. But yeah, when young missionaries go out, we are we have needs, we have concerns, and it's tough. And so be ready to take care of the missionaries and to help them out just as much as you help out and serve and pray for the Italians, be it the members or the investigators. And so there will be tremendous opportunities and blessings and trials in your interactions with the other missionaries. And so don't sleep on them, don't forget about them, because you need each other. And I feel like your mission will be incomplete, and you'll miss out on some opportunities if you don't consider that third pivotal group, which is the missionaries that are just as important. And you have to take care of yourselves first. You have to make sure that you're well before you can be at your best as a missionary and find and teach and testify. Read the scriptures as much as you can, and strengthen your testimony of the things that you believe. And but yeah, just read the Book of Mormon and pray and prepare yourself mentally to do a lot of really hard work and to encounter some challenges. And but I think if you're ready for an adventure and you're ready for some hard work, and you have faith in Jesus Christ and a willingness to serve, that you'll be fine, and that there's really nothing that you can do to be fully prepared for a mission. And so anything that you do, I think you're going to feel a little bit inadequate when you get out there, because there is a steep learning curve and just a lot of opposition. I don't know if opposition is the right word. Perhaps a lot of opportunity out there. But I think anything that you do, you're still going to feel a little bit unprepared and a little bit inadequate. But it won't be time wasted, and you'll be happy that you prepared. Whatever it is that you do, reading, praying, or preparing yourself in any way, just to serve the Lord and to put your own preferences aside. But it'll be the happiest time of your life. I loved my mission, and it was something that I had always wanted to do, just because I knew that it was what the Lord expected of me, and I wanted to come through for Him. I wanted to I just wanted to have that in my life. I wanted to be able to give that back, and I wanted to have that honor and that opportunity. And so it was vital to me. It was something that I had always, it meant more to me than anything. And so if you feel that way about serving a mission, if it's a priority in any way to you, then don't let anything stop you from reaching that goal, because it'll make your life better, and you have the opportunity to help so many people, and you learn things that you would have never learned otherwise. But for me, I think the most important thing was just to feel that between my Heavenly Father and myself, that that I had offered that type of service and that type of sacrifice. That I don't know. I felt that I did what I needed to do, and so it's by no means the end or means you can stop. But I know that it's what it means a lot to our Heavenly Father, and just that in itself, it meant the world to me. And so I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful for my mission.